and joining us now, he is with The Athletic, spent many years with ESPN, and you probably know him best from the quarterback tier articles, which are a must-read in the offseason. It's Mike Sando. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for taking the time on the show. It's almost like this week you decided you wanted to be on our show because you've written a lot about the Minnesota Vikings, and your stuff on Kirk Cousins versus good defenses is really fascinating. I want to get to that. But something that you just posted today on The Athletic about Stefon Diggs and Adam Thielen, I thought was really interesting, that you quoted an evaluator saying that they think that Stefon Diggs is the better receiver than Thielen because he can do more. So what do you make of this Stefon Diggs situation where they have not used he and Thielen as much early in the year?
Yeah, well, Thielen ended up being, I think, higher in the overall picture of this piece that I did.
Yes.
But there are people who think that if one of them had to live on their own, so to speak, right, and be the driver of the offense, that Diggs might be better equipped to do that. So I think it's early to make a judgment on the offense. It's disconcerting a little bit, how Cousins has played at times, how they haven't been taking advantage of their weapons. I would like to, if I were, hoping that if I were a Viking fan, I'd be hoping that they'd open things up a little bit more. I think the game plan last week was really good. Obviously, it was against a weaker defense, but move Cousins around. You've got to find ways to get the passing game going. You're built to take advantage of those receivers, and so find that balance. They've really, it's Mike Zimmer grabbing the steering wheel and overcorrecting. Ever since they really got rid of DiFilippo.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs to sort of come back, hey, let's stay in the middle of the road here.
Yeah, my thought, Mike, is that this year Mike Zimmer owns the offense. That even though he has tried in the past to be, I'm the defensive coach and I'm going to let Norv run it. I'm going to let Shermer run it. I'm going to let DiFilippo run it. Now it seems like him saying, no, we need to run the football with Dalvin Cook. That's how our offense has to be driven. That's him basically taking ownership, and I think also has to be held responsible when it doesn't work.
I agree. My hope would be for the team that it evens out over the course of the year. They have some, really credible people on the offensive side of the ball. They're obviously Gary Kubiak, and I think Kevin Stefanski's been a head coaching candidate for a reason too. I think he's good, and he's obviously knows the landscape. He's been in Minnesota a long time, and so that has to me sort of even out a little bit. And I would think that it will. I think you're going to have more success offensively as the season goes along. Playing a more balanced, emphasizing the pass a little bit more on early downs, that type of thing. It just makes too much sense. You're going to be better. You're going to have success doing that.
Yeah, and after seeing what they did last week, they just shred the Giants. This kind of brings me to the article that you had on Monday about Kirk Cousins versus good and bad defenses. And I did something similar about how he played against bad defenses, what his PFF grade, against good defenses, PFF grades and stuff like that. And it's usually through his whole career pretty poor. Now, they're good defenses, of course, but to not even have good games at all really against really good defenses. What does that say about Kirk Cousins as a quarterback?
Well, I think we could do this for a lot of quarterbacks, and they wouldn't have great games against great defenses. I think that's why the defenses are great. You have good stats because you do well against most teams. So at the same time, I think what it tells us is that Kirk Cousins is, when I do my quarterback tiers thing every year, if things are going great for him, he's sort of the bottom of that second tier, and if things are just sort of ho hum for him, then he's in that third tier. And I think he is sort of an upper third tier guy, and that means you can win with him, but you need to have things right around him, and he's not going to necessarily elevate you. He's not going to put it on his back. He's not going to be the reason you won most of the games. Doesn't mean he can't have big games, but I think that the confusion people have is because they paid him at the top of the market. Mm-hmm. So people expect him to be a top of the market player, but it's not really the way the market looks. Look at any other position. Look at middle linebacker last year. C.J. Mosley got $17 million in free agency. He got more than Bobby Wagner of Seattle. Who do we think's better?
Right.
Everybody would say Wagner's better, right? It's the price of free agency. So that's what Kirk Cousins is having to live down because it's like, oh, hey, you got paid at the top. But he was never the top. I don't think the Vikings thought he was the top. They just paid what they had to pay to get what they thought was a better guy than what they had.
So I guess the question is, and I totally agree with you that there are a number of quarterbacks, probably the majority of them, who if they have a really good situation, then they could get you somewhere. And if they don't, then they won't. But with Cousins, it's really hard to argue that he doesn't have a great situation. I mean, what we get down to here in Minnesota, Mike, is, well, his left guard isn't playing that well. And it's like, come on, guys. I mean, I know that's a factor, but he's got two elite receivers. I mean, the fact that Diggs and Thielen are both in your article about number one receivers tells you a lot. He's got two tight ends who could play now. He's got one of the best running backs in the league. I mean, this season should be, hey, we gave you pretty much everything you could have asked for. And if you don't get it done, if you don't get us into the playoffs, including having a really good defense still, then that tells, I think, the Vikings about what they need to do at the quarterback position going forward.
Yeah. Now, at the same time, they basically, you'd say he's had two bad games, right? You'd say at Green Bay and at Chicago.
Yeah.
And then they rolled Atlanta and they rolled Oakland, right? And they basically rolled the Giants.
Yep.
So they probably lost the two games they should have lost, right?
I guess so. I mean, those are 50-50 games to me, but you could say that.
Yeah, but they wouldn't be favored to win at Green Bay or favored to win at Chicago, right? You would hope.
Right.
Like I would say in the Green Bay game, he made a really bad interception that maybe cost him the game. And you're hoping your guy doesn't do that, right? I mean, that was a game that was there to be won. Green Bay was not playing great offensively. They had 21 points early, but it's a 21-16 game where you're bummed you lost it. I think let's see how it plays out. Like to me, this week, Philadelphia is totally a game where you're at home against a good team that has a bad defense. I want to see this be like, Cousins really, really putting up some numbers. Remember last year, they played the Rams, even though they lost the game. It was like 38-31. You're like, wow, that's what it can look like, right? So this may be that type of game where I don't know if Philly has a good offense. They may not put up a ton on the Vikings defense. We'll see. But I would like to see Kirk Cousins and the Viking offense sort of keep pace in this game, right? Because they're going against the worst defense in the matchup. They should have a good game. They should have 24 or more points, and they should have a great chance to win it.
Talking with Mike Sando with The Athletic. And one of the coolest things that you do is talk to a lot of executives. You have a lot of great quotes from people inside the game, which I think provides a lot of insight. And it seems like every year in your quarterback tier piece with Cousins, it comes up somewhere from someone about the inability to win the big games. And you mentioned what he did at LA and what he did in Philly last year. He had a very good game against the Eagles to win one on the road, but it just keeps sort of coming up, Mike, that every time he loses a big game, Twitter goes nuts with he's this and this against winning teams. He's this and this in Monday Night Football and all those things. And me as a person who loves analytics and things like that, I think normally in my life, I would be like, oh, come on, guys. I mean, that's kind of basic narrative sort of thing. But as it stacks up and we see it time and time again, it feels more real. So how do people around the league see this issue that Cousins has had throughout his career?
They don't see Kirk Cousins as somebody that the whole team rallies around for whatever reason. And, just that he's leading that team. And remember when he was coming out, people were like, oh, he wasn't really a captain at Michigan State or all those things that are sort of silly. But I think that's just sort of the feel that you have. And now then it's hard. I think it's underrated how hard it is to parachute into a new team. It's a veteran team, an established team, be anointed as the highest paid guy, and suddenly have it be organic that you're one of the guys and leading the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my hope for him would be that develops over time and that you see that. But it's hard to measure whether that's happening. After when they struggle a couple games, Diggs is trying to get off the team. He's not saying, hey, I stand by my guy. Don't attack my quarterback. You know what I mean? And so that has to grow. Hopefully that grows together over time. And it's not easy. And maybe some of that's on him. Maybe he's just not naturally that type of guy.
Yeah, and it was noticeable the week after Chicago that we didn't hear that from anyone. We didn't hear from anyone come out and say, hey, like, I believe Cousins is going to get it back together and have big games as we go forward. It was more of, well, I didn't say I was frustrated. You're frustrated. I mean, there was a lot of like very sort of weird and almost petty things that were being said by people, but not the thing that you wanted to hear was a belief in Cousins.
Yeah, but some of that starts with the head coach.
Yeah,
the head coach
I agree.
Never likes any of the quarterbacks, right?
Teddy.
The head coach is going to criticize the offense all the time, right? The special teams, the kicker. You know what I mean? He's not really criticizing the defensive play calling, right?
Oh, of course
You know
not,
what I
because
mean?
he's making it.
You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
and it's sort of that old school defensive, almost, Bill Parcells hard edge type thing to it. I think if he were not just like blowing smoke and saying Kirk Cousins is elite, like Jim Harbaugh used to say about Alex Smith years ago, remember?
Yeah.
He would
Yep.
act like he was Tom Brady. Don't do that. But I think he could set a different tone that could be helpful to Kirk Cousins, and I don't see that.
So this has been a great conversation here, Mike, because we've been talking about him handling Cousins in a way with kid gloves after games. But then you have probably other players in that locker room going, well, wait a minute, why won't he criticize Cousins, but he will criticize the offense and fire John DeFilippo? And it's kind of hard to be consistent. But when Case Keenum was here, he hammered Keenum, even though he kept winning game after game after game. So it is almost like, aside from Teddy Bridgewater, Mike Zimmer doesn't really know what to do with his quarterbacks.
Yeah, he wasn't hired to be the quarterback whisperer, and a lot of the guys on the defensive side of the ball want to win the game kind of a certain way, right? I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
it beats 14-13 every week, they'd probably take that. So it's an interesting way the team is built with Zimmer being, the head coach, and then in a Division II where you've got to, you might have to outscore Aaron Rodgers or even Stafford on his best day, can move it up and down the field. So it is. Minnesota is just like a source of. It's just a fascinating team. It's really fascinating.
Well, it definitely is. And that's why people should give us the 5-star rating when they download the show on iTunes, I think. Mike, before I let you go, how do you think this Diggs thing plays out? Because given my best guess, I would say the guy's got to be here. I mean, you look at his contract and his age, there's absolutely no reason for the Vikings to try and move a player like that who's so good on such a favorable deal. And I just don't see any leverage on his part. Like, how would he get out of town aside from saying, I'm just not going to play at all for you? I think he just has to kind of gut it out.
I do too, and I think the tide should turn. I think they're going to have some better days. You play the Bears every week on the road; it's not going to be fun, but they should have some success. I agree. I think they did a nice job of not, being wishy-washy. I mean, they supposedly put those fines down, and he showed up, and maybe cooler heads prevailed a little bit for him. I think he's a good player. Doesn't seem like there's a history of him being a bad teammate or anything we've heard of. I think you get emotional, right? I mean, It means a lot to these guys, and as receivers in particular. I've been covering the league for 20 years. They're looking at the box score after the game. It's just the nature of the position. They all want to be an important part of it. And when they're not, it's hard to hide your emotions, especially in this day and age when everything's so raw and exposed in social media and you can't hide from it, So I would hope that would blow over from their standpoint. It should. He should be on the team. They shouldn't be getting rid of good players that can help them win. They should be trying to find ways to win with their players. And it's a long season. So if they can ride this out, it's a big win. It's a big game this weekend if they can win against Philly. I think you start to feel better. You've got a couple in a row, and you don't have to read too much into each week. You can't live and die every week.
Yeah, and it feels like this team does a lot because of sort of the narrative with Cousins, how much they paid for him, the winning window, which I think everyone feels like is slipping away, the expectations that were set. And I've been writing about it since I don't know when. I mean, even when they hired Kevin Stefanski, there was like a very tense press conference, which normally when someone becomes an offensive coordinator, it's like, hooray, I'm the offensive coordinator. I'm so happy to be here. And yet it was a very sort of awkward moment there. And I think that sort of speaks to the tone that's been set around this team, that everybody knows if they come up short, that there could be a lot different in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. The expectations are high for all the things that they've done. And it's, like I said, I think Zimmer also sets I don't know about a volatile tone, but there's an edge, right?
Absolutely.
And then there's an edge to the whole building probably, and all those circumstances make it even more so. And by the way, it's a tough division, so great drama, great theater.
Mike Sando, you have been for a long time one of my favorite writers on ESPN, now The Athletic, and you do must-read stuff. You've got two things to look at. The one from Monday on Kirk Cousins, your pick six, and then a really cool piece about the number one wide receivers, who are the NFL's true number one wide receivers, both of those at The Athletic. Great to have you, Mike. Thanks for coming on.